So that makes sense. But even though we already know the ideal number, the scheduling problem may still be somewhat difficult. At least it is not trivial. Why is that? One's work hours should be continuous in each day. So you actually know that the demand is something like this. So this is time. This is the number of CSRs you need. You know that during during the morning and afternoon you have two peaks. And maybe you also noticed that during the noontime, during the lunchtime, you don't need that many person because everybody need to eat lunch. All right? But you are required to hire CSRs and ask them to work for 8 or 9 consecutive hours. All right? They either work in this way or work in that way. You are unable to ask one to work for the first 3 hours and then go back to home and then work for the other 5 hours. That's not possible. So that means you have this constraint. They need to work consecutively in a day. That's a constraint. Also, some people are needed or not allowed in some periods. For example, if you are talking about CSRs, they are not all identical, right? Some of them have different or special positions. There may be needed to have at least one manager in each night shift because during the evening time you have fewer workers. So you need to make sure that it's not all CSRs during the night shift is just like they know nothing. You need to have at least one experienced managers. Okay, that's one possibility. Also, maybe you have a policy saying that pregnant women they should not work at night because you want to take care of their bodies, you want to take care of their lives, their children's. So these are some issues that gives you further constraints. Finally, there may be fairness issues. Okay, sometimes you need to have some people to work at night, some kind of overtime work if they work also in the morning. But you also know that you cannot do that for one person only. So one CSR may be required to work at night for at most once per week. You cannot say you have one CSR, she or he works for every night. And there is some other guys, they don't need to do that at all. So that's not fair. So in some sense, if you are going to have a good schedule, that should not happen. You should somehow allocate works to all your CSRs somewhat equally. So all these issues should be taken care, and traditionally CSR scheduling in that company is done by hands. So that may be okay, but that's also not very good, right? That work is tedious, and that is very easy for some people to make mistakes. And also, the practice before we talk to the company is that one or two senior managers, they need to work for a whole day to create a schedule. And of course, that schedule is also not perfect at all. Sometimes you would see some shortage, but sometimes there are some extra workers. So for shortage, that means you need 40%, but for everyone to execute your schedule, you only see 30 people on duty for that particular period. Then you have a workforce shortage. Sometimes, on the other hand, you have extra CSRs. So maybe there is a better way to schedule your workers, to schedule those CSRs so that the amount of shortage decreases and the amount of extra CSRs also decreases. Finally, if you always need to take one day to create a schedule, if you think about, oh well, every month you need one day, every month you need one day, that may be fine. But if you are talking about emergent issues such as accidents and so on and so on and so on, then in that case, probably you also agree that, well, that's not a very good idea to have this kind of manual scheduling because that would take too much time to respond to emergent events. Okay? It will be too difficult to deal with emergent issues or accidents. So for example, maybe for one day, in the morning, some people call you and say, oh, I get a car accident. I'm sorry, today I cannot go to work. And I need to have days off for 5 days, For example, so as long as one or two persons having these events, you need to reschedule somehow for the remaining days of your month. But then that's an issue saying that you just don't have that much time to give you one additional day to create a schedule. That's not a very good idea. Okay, so we have all these issues to solve if we are able to have a model, have a system to make this scheduling automatic or even smarter. That would be great. So let's try to do this with operations research. Okay, operations research. We may see that this is an allocation problem because the number of CSRs is limited. If I have 1,000 CSRs, I don't have this scheduling problem. We just randomly pick some people to work, then we're done. So because the number of CSRs is limited, so what we need to do is to try to meet the demands under resource limitations, right? We want to minimize the total shortage in some sense. So if this is an allocation problem, we all know that linear programming is a good idea because linear programming is naturally formulated to allocate resources to complete tasks. This is also a selection problem. What does that mean? For each CSR in each day, we need to tell him or her what to do. If I ask you to do job A, typically you cannot do job B at the same time. Or if I ask you to work at night on Monday, I cannot ask you to do that for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So basically, I need to assign something to something. I need to assign works to workers. That's basically an integer programming problem, okay? So I need to assign you to that position to you, and so on. That's integer programming. We probably would agree that this is not a balancing problem. What's that mean? When we are talking about nonlinear programming, we always know that we are talking about some kind of trade-offs between demand and sales margin, between setup cost and between ordering cost and holding cost, or some other kinds of trade-offs, right? Between risk and expected returns. But in this case, we don't really have that kind of balance. So we probably don't need nonlinear programming in this particular example. So our task is to formulate an integer program. This integer program, we're going to make it a linear integer 1. We will try to tell each CSR which day to work and to minimize the total shortage for the next month. When we ask the CSR to work, we will also tell him how to work. That means when to go to the office, when is the time for you to leave, when do you have a lunch break. We're going to do that at the end of a month so that in the next month, everybody knows when to have a days off and when to go on to the work. And we want to follow all the scheduling rules set by the companies. That's pretty much what we want to do. May not be a very, very huge problem, but it's a realistic problem. And most of the companies, as long as they are having workers taking turns to go on to the jobs, then they have these scheduling problems, and maybe integer programming, maybe operations research may help them.